So let's talk about right action this morning. One of the greatest gifts in my life have been these teachings, the Dharma, the Buddhist teachings, and not only have they transformed my life for the better, they've given me a roadmap to really make sense of this crazy life that each of us has been given. And my love of the teachings has grown over the years, the more I get into them, the more I study them. And they're as rich and as relevant today as they were 2,600 years ago. And this morning, I want to zero in on another component of the Eightfold Path, this time wise action. And wise action, you may recall, comes under the ethical branch of the Eightfold Path. And let's start with a definition of wise action. The Pali is kamanta in Pali, and it's often translated as wise, right, appropriate action, um, but not in a moral sense. It's not a moral judgment. It's an assessment of its appropriateness or its wholesomeness. And we're here, we're not only talking about physical action. In fact, we're primarily not talking about physical action. Rather, we're talking about a broader ethical foundation. Unwholesome action or an absence of harmful action is wise action. Action which is based in care and compassion for ourselves and all beings. And it comes out of a realization that the Buddha talked about of this deep interconnectedness between all of us and all things. But it is not just wholesome in the sense that it's avoiding harm. It's also taking action which embodies and implements our values in the world, and none the least of which is loving kindness, metta. In other words, love and care for all beings, all things, including ourselves. And here again, I'm not just referring to bodily actions, I'm referring to actions such as speech, and more broadly, thoughts, which are a form of cognitive action, if you will. So wise action occurs both externally in our bodily actions and internally, perhaps more importantly, internally, with our thoughts, with our emotional responses, with our ethics, with our attitudes, with our biases, and so forth. It's very overarching in terms of its what it encompasses. The Buddha was quoted as saying, quote, "What you frequently reflect and ponder upon, that becomes the inclination of your mind. What you frequently reflect and ponder on, that becomes the inclination of your mind." There again, he's talking, among other things, about wise action. So our mental habits as they've developed over our lives are also forms of action and can be a source of wise action. The thoughts, in other words, that we have about ourselves, about others, about the world, that's where we really see wise action coming into play. Now, much of our thoughts, as you know, are ego-based, which evolved to assure our survival. And that doesn't make them unwise because ego-based thoughts can be wholesome or unwholesome. That is, they can be in the form of self-judgment, self-criticism, and worry, which are less wholesome, or they can be in the form of goodwill and kindness and compassion toward ourselves and others. I mean, all of those things can come out of an ego motivation. But this is wise action broadly defined. So when we practice wise action, we set an intention to cultivate goodwill toward ourselves and toward all beings. We establish a dedication to avoid causing harm wherever it arises, wherever we see its potential. This is wise action. And we do this by periodically checking in with ourselves, sort of doing checking our inner weather system to see if our actions are wise and wholesome and not causing harms. We pause, as we often do, and check in on the tone, the flavor, if you will, of our thoughts. By which I mean, are they filled with kindness and care for ourselves and others? Are they angry, spiteful, envious, or otherwise unwholesome? Our outward actions reflect our inner monologue and vice versa. Our inner monologue informs our outward actions. If we behave in wholesome ways, it strengthens our not inner right action, our inner tendency toward right action. And conversely, when our thoughts are wholesome, as I said a moment ago, they inform our outward behavior. When we cultivate loving kindness within, it reinforces the thoughts, words, and deeds that we put into the world. And what that does is it often creates a multiplier effect. It often results in it coming back to us, and it also sort of creates a contagiousness where others, will respond in kind. We all respond to kindness. We all respond to goodwill by wanting to carry it forward, pay it forward, if you will. And the result is that we give to the world greater compassion, greater goodwill, and more wholesome environment in which to live. So those are my thoughts this morning on right action. Let's get your thoughts.